The wind howled through the narrow canyons of Varela 9, carrying with it the dry scent of dust and rusted metal. Far from the main colony, where few dared to go, lay the remains of an old mining rig. It had been abandoned years ago when workers discovered that dragons had nested near it. To the settlers, dragons were not creatures to be pitied or understood. They were monsters, dangerous and untamed, something to avoid at all costs. But Elias Kane was not like the other settlers. He was a mechanic who believed that everything broken could be fixed. Machines, ships, or even lives. On that cold evening, Elias had come to the canyon searching for old scrap parts. He was hoping to find components for the water recycler in his workshop. But as he walked along the edge of a deep ravine, he heard something unexpected. It was a sound unlike any he had heard before, a low, pained growl followed by a series of soft, chirping cries. Elias froze, scanning the area. At first, he thought it might be an old generator failing somewhere below, but no machine sounded like that. Then he saw it, nestled between two jagged cliffs, partially hidden by twisted beams of the collapsed rig, was a dragon. Elias's heart pounded. He had seen dragons from a distance before, huge winged shapes against the horizon, but never this close. This one was different. Her massive body was slumped awkwardly against the rock, and her once glorious wings were torn, hanging limply at her sides. Her scales, usually a sign of strength, were dull and cracked. Her legs, he could see them, were badly broken, twisted in unnatural angles as if crushed under the heavy metal debris of the mining structure. But what caught his attention most were the three tiny creatures beside her. Hatchlings. They were no larger than dogs, their scales soft and pale. They chirped weakly, pressing close to their mother's side for warmth and safety. She shifted slightly, growling and warning as Elias took a cautious step forward. Even in her state, she was ready to defend them with her life. Elias crouched, keeping his movements slow. "Easy," he whispered, knowing full well she could not understand his words, but hoping his tone might carry some meaning. The dragon's golden eyes locked on him. They were full of pain, but also something Elias did not expect: fear. He understood the situation almost instantly. The old mining rig had likely collapsed while she was nesting. Trapped and injured, she had not been able to leave. And now she was too weak to hunt for food or protect her young if a predator came. She was dying, and so would her hatchlings. Elias felt a deep ache in his chest. He had always been told dragons were vicious, but this one was no monster. She was a mother, holding on only for the sake of her children. He should have left. That was the smart thing to do. The colony had strict rules about staying away from dragons. Anyone caught interfering with them faced heavy fines or even exile. And if the security patrols found out he was anywhere near this nest, his life on Varela 9 would be over. But Elias was not the kind of man who walked away from something that needed fixing. He sat down on a rock a safe distance away, keeping his body language calm. He watched her for a long time, trying to understand her. She did not lunge at him or roar. She only growled when he shifted to close. That meant she was exhausted, and it meant she was giving him a chance, if only a small one. He knew he had to do something, but the task ahead seemed impossible. He had repaired shattered engines and built functioning machines out of scrap. But this was no machine. This was a living, breathing creature. Still, Elias was a problem solver. He took out his small scanner and activated it, carefully aiming at her legs from a distance. The readings confirmed what he already suspected: multiple fractures. Without help, her bones would never heal, and she would not be able to hunt or even stand. Elias looked at her hatchlings. They were restless, mewling softly, too young to survive on their own. They needed her. He made his choice. "I'll help you," he said softly, though he knew she could not understand his words. "I don't know if you'll let me, but I'll try." The dragon watched him with those sharp golden eyes, as if weighing his intent. Elias spent the next hour examining the collapsed rig, collecting bits of metal, wiring, and tubing. He worked silently, always keeping the dragon in his sight. She did not attack, though her gaze never left him. Slowly, she seemed to recognize that he meant no harm. By nightfall, he had gathered enough materials to begin a rough plan in his head. He would need to build a temporary brace for her legs. It would not heal her, but it might give her enough stability to move. And if she could move, she could hunt. It would take days, maybe weeks, but Elias had built complicated machines in less time. The real challenge would be getting close enough to fit it onto her without losing his life. As the sky darkened, the hatchlings curled up against their mother, their small bodies shivering in the cold. Elias felt a pang of guilt. They needed warmth, food, and safety, and right now, they had none of it. He stood, slowly backing away toward his speeder. "I'll be back tomorrow," he promised, though the words were more for himself than for her. The dragon growled softly but did not move. Elias took that as permission. As he rode back toward his workshop, his mind raced. He would need better tools, food to offer her, and maybe something to keep the hatchlings warm while their mother healed. It would not be easy, and it would certainly be dangerous. But for Elias Kane, it was simple. This was what he did. He fixed what others had given up on. And now, he was going to fix her. The next morning, Elias Kane was already awake before the first light touched the colony. Sleep had been shallow, filled with restless thoughts about golden dragon eyes, broken bones, and the tiny hatchlings who depended on their mother. He had spent most of the night sketching designs, filling his datapad with diagrams for a makeshift exoskeleton brace. It wasn't just an idea anymore. He had a plan. His workshop smelled of oil and old metal as he laid out the tools he would need. Wrenches, cutters, welding torches, and small scanners were arranged neatly on the bench. The parts he had salvaged from the collapsed mining rig were already cleaned and sorted. He examined each piece carefully. It wasn't the kind of material you would normally use for medical equipment, but Elias had made do with less in the past. "This will hold," he muttered to himself, tapping a reinforced alloy plate, at least long enough to get her moving. He also prepared more food. The dragon had eaten the meat he offered yesterday, and that was a start. If he wanted her to trust him, food would help. Trust would be his most important tool. By mid-morning, he loaded everything onto his speeder boxes of materials, his tools, and a large cooler filled with meat. He glanced around to make sure no one was watching before leaving the colony. The less people knew about what he was doing, the safer it would be for him and for the dragon. The ride to the canyon felt shorter this time, though his thoughts made it heavy. What if she rejected his help? What if the brace didn't work? What if the colony's security discovered him when Elias reached the canyon? He slowed his speeder and parked in the same spot as yesterday. He scanned the area before approaching. The dragon was still there, lying in the same place, but something was different. Her head lifted as soon as she heard him. There was no growl this time, only a steady gaze that followed his every step. Her hatchlings chirped softly, hiding between her claws when Elias drew near. "That's right," Elias said softly, kneeling at a safe distance. "It's just me again." He opened the cooler and slid another piece of meat toward her. The dragon stretched out her neck and ate it without hesitation. He noticed how her movements, though slow, seemed less tense than before. Maybe she was starting to understand that he wasn't a threat. "I need to measure your legs," he said, more for himself than for her. "If I can get the sizing right, I can make the brace fit perfectly." The dragon's golden eyes stayed fixed on him, but she didn't growl when he stood and walked closer. He moved slowly, keeping his gestures calm. Elias crouched a few feet away, scanning her legs with his handheld device. The readings came up quickly: compound fractures, significant swelling, and muscle damage from being pinned too long. He winced. It was worse than he thought. "You've been through hell," he murmured, "but we can fix this. We'll make you walk again." She blinked slowly at him. He took that as permission to continue. He spent hours working in the canyon that day. First, he cleared more debris from the collapsed rig. He wanted the area around her to be safer, both for him and for her hatchlings. He used a small cutting torch to remove sharp beams and set up a temporary barrier of scrap metal around the nest. Then he began shaping the brace components. using a combination of scavenged alloy plating and old exhaustwood parts. He designed a structure that could wrap around her legs and support her weight. It wasn't going to heal her, but it could give her the strength to stand and maybe even walk. The dragon watched everything. At first, Elias felt nervous under her constant gaze, but after a while, it became almost comforting. She wasn't just tolerating his presence, she was studying him, just as he was studying her. When the sun began to sink low, Elias stepped back and looked at his progress. The frame of the brace was rough but sturdy. He would need to add padding and adjust the joints to make sure it could handle her movements. "I'll bring more tools tomorrow," he said aloud. "We're getting closer." The dragon tilted her head slightly, a motion that made Elias pause. It almost felt like she understood him, or at least sensed his intentions. Before leaving, he placed several more pieces of meat within her reach. The hatchlings perked up, chirping as their mother gently nudged the food toward them. Elias couldn't help but smile. "You're a good mother," he said softly, on his way back to the colony. Elias kept going over the next steps in his mind. He would need to reinforce the brace with stronger joints. He also wanted to create a portable incubator, using spare power cells, something to keep the hatchlings warm when their mother had to move. If she could regain some mobility, she could hunt again, and they wouldn't starve. But even as he planned, a shadow of worry lingered in his thoughts. He wasn't just breaking the law by helping her. He was putting himself directly at odds with the colony authorities. If the security patrols discovered what he was doing, they wouldn't care about his reasons. They would see a man interfering with a dangerous species, and that would be enough to ruin him. Still, when Elias thought about turning back, he remembered the hatchlings, how small and fragile they had looked, and the way the dragon had eaten from his offering without aggression. He couldn't abandon them. By the time he reached his workshop, night had fully fallen. The colony lights shimmered in the distance, but Elias barely noticed them. He unloaded his tools and went straight to his workbench. Tomorrow, he would refine the brace. Tomorrow, he would try to get close enough to actually fit it onto her legs. As he leaned over his sketches, exhaustion finally caught up to him, but his determination burned brighter. Elias Kane was a mechanic, and when he saw something broken, he fixed it. No matter how big, no matter how dangerous. The next morning, Elias Kane was already awake before the first light touched the colony. Sleep had been shallow, filled with restless thoughts about golden dragon eyes, broken bones, and the tiny hatchlings who depended on their mother. He had spent most of the night sketching designs, filling his datapad with diagrams for a makeshift exoskeleton brace. It wasn't just an idea anymore. He had a plan. His workshop smelled of oil and old metal as he laid out the tools he would need. Wrenches, cutters, welding torches, and small scanners were arranged neatly on the bench. The parts he had salvaged from the collapsed mining rig were already clean and sorted. He examined each piece carefully. It wasn't the kind of material you would normally use for medical equipment, but Elias had made do with less in the past. "This will hold," he muttered to himself, tapping a reinforced alloy plate, at least long enough to get her moving. He also prepared more food. The dragon had eaten the meat he offered yesterday, and that was a start. If he wanted her to trust him, food would help. Trust would be his most important tool. By mid-morning, he loaded everything onto his speeder boxes of materials, his tools, and a large cooler filled with meat. He glanced around to make sure no one was watching before leaving the colony. The less people knew about what he was doing, the safer it would be for him and for the dragon. The ride to the canyon felt shorter this time, though his thoughts made it heavy. What if she rejected his help? What if the brace didn't work? What if the colony's security discovered him when Elias reached the canyon? He slowed his speeder and parked in the same spot as yesterday. He scanned the area before approaching. The dragon was still there, lying in the same place, but something was different. Her head lifted as soon as she heard him. There was no growl this time, only a steady gaze that followed his every step. Her hatchlings chirped softly, hiding between her claws when Elias drew near. "That's right," Elias said softly, kneeling at a safe distance. "It's just me again." He opened the cooler and slid another piece of meat toward her. The dragon stretched out her neck and ate it without hesitation. He noticed how her movements, though slow, seemed less tense than before. Maybe she was starting to understand that he wasn't a threat. "I need to measure your legs," he said, more for himself than for her. "If I can get the sizing right, I can make the brace fit perfectly." The dragon's golden eyes stayed fixed on him, but she didn't growl when he stood and walked closer. He moved slowly, keeping his gestures calm. Elias crouched a few feet away, scanning her legs with his handheld device. The readings came up quickly: compound fractures, significant swelling, and muscle damage from being pinned too long. He winced. It was worse than he thought. "You've been through hell," he murmured. "But we can fix this. We'll make you walk again." She blinked slowly at him. He took that as permission to continue. He spent hours working in the canyon that day. First, he cleared more debris from the collapsed rig. He wanted the area around her to be safer, both for him and for her hatchlings. He used a small cutting torch to remove sharp beams and set up a temporary barrier of scrap metal around the nest. Then he began shaping the brace components, using a combination of scavenged alloy plating and old exhaustwood parts. He designed a structure that could wrap around her legs and support her weight. It wasn't going to heal her, but it could give her the strength to stand and maybe even walk. The dragon watched everything. At first, Elias felt nervous under her constant gaze, but after a while, it became almost comforting. She wasn't just tolerating his presence, she was studying him, just as he was studying her. When the sun began to sink low, Elias stepped back and looked at his progress. The frame of the brace was rough but sturdy. He would need to add padding and adjust the joints to make sure it could handle her movements. "I'll bring more tools tomorrow," he said aloud. "We're getting closer." The dragon tilted her head slightly, a motion that made Elias pause. It almost felt like she understood him, or at least sensed his intentions. Before leaving, he placed several more pieces of meat within her reach. The hatchlings perked up, chirping as their mother gently nudged the food toward them. Elias couldn't help but smile. "You're a good mother," he said softly, on his way back to the colony. Elias kept going over the next steps in his mind. He would need to reinforce the brace with stronger joints. He also wanted to create a portable incubator, using spare power cells, something to keep the hatchlings warm when their mother had to move. If she could regain some mobility, she could hunt again, and they wouldn't starve. But even as he planned, a shadow of worry lingered in his thoughts. He wasn't just breaking the law by helping her. He was putting himself directly at odds with the colony authorities. If the security patrols discovered what he was doing, they wouldn't care about his reasons. They would see a man interfering with a dangerous species, and that would be enough to ruin him. Still, when Elias thought about turning back, he remembered the hatchlings, how small and fragile they had looked, and the way the dragon had eaten from his offering without aggression. He couldn't abandon them. By the time he reached his workshop, night had fully fallen. The colony lights shimmered in the distance, but Elias barely noticed them. He unloaded his tools and went straight to his workbench. Tomorrow, he would refine the brace. Tomorrow, he would try to get close enough to actually fit it onto her legs. As he leaned over his sketches, exhaustion finally caught up to him, but his determination burned brighter. Elias Kane was a mechanic, and when he saw something broken, he fixed it. No matter how big, no matter how dangerous. The following day, Elias woke up with a sense of urgency. His plans for the brace had grown more complex overnight, and he knew that time was against him. The dragon needed to stand, to hunt, and to protect her young. Every day she remained injured was another day her strength faded. He packed everything he could carry: reinforced joints, extra plating, soft padding made from old insulation materials, and a portable heating unit for the hatchlings. He also packed more food. As he loaded the supplies onto his speeder, his thoughts drifted to the dragon's eyes again. There was a strange weight in her gaze, as if she understood more than he expected. As he left the colony, a checkpoint caught his attention. Two security officers were standing near a patrol vehicle, scanning outgoing travelers. Elias kept his head low, hoping they would ignore him. But one of them raised a hand. "Where are you headed, Kane?" The officer asked out. Elias forced a calm tone. "Scrap run. Same as always. Need parts for my workshop." The officer narrowed his eyes. "Stay clear of the canyons. Dragons have been spotted closer to the colony. Patrol's been ordered to increase our watch. If you see anything, report it." Elias nodded quickly. "Understood." He drove off, his heart beating faster than before. The security patrols were already interested in the area. If they found out about the mother dragon, they wouldn't care that she was injured or that her hatchlings were helpless. They'd kill her to protect the colony. When he reached the canyon, Elias immediately felt a strange tension in the air. The dragon wasn't in the same position as yesterday. She was alert, her head raised high. Nostrils flaring, she let out a low, rumbling growl as he approached. Elias froze. "It's me," he said softly, raising his hands to show he carried no threat. The dragon relaxed slightly, though her golden eyes darted toward the horizon. Elias followed her gaze and saw deep tire tracks imprinted in the dirt tracks. That hadn't been there before. His stomach tightened. Someone else had been here. He crouched beside the dragon, speaking quietly as if she could understand. "I saw the patrols this morning. They're coming closer. We don't have much time." She blinked slowly, but kept her attention fixed on the tracks. Elias studied them more carefully. These weren't colony patrol vehicles. They were smaller, lighter. He knew the type: off-world poachers. The realization made his blood run cold. Poachers hunted dragons for their scales, their bones, even their eggs. They would kill the mother and take the hatchlings without a second thought. Elias felt a surge of anger. "Not while I'm here," he muttered. He worked faster than ever, assembling the brace and adjusting its size. The dragon growled softly whenever he moved too close, but she no longer snapped or tried to drive him off. It felt like progress. "Listen," Elias said, as if the dragon could hear his thoughts. "This brace will help you stand. If you can move, you can fight, and you're going to need that soon." The hatchlings chirped weakly, crawling closer to their mother as Elias set up the heating unit near their nest. The little ones huddled against the warmth, and for a moment, Elias felt a small sense of accomplishment. By late afternoon, he had finished most of the assembly. It wasn't perfect. He wished for better materials, better tools, but it would work. He only needed to fit it onto her legs. That, however, was the hardest part. Elias approached slowly, keeping his body low and his voice soft. "I need to put this on you. It will hurt at first, but it will help." The dragon growled, baring her teeth. "I know," Elias said gently, "but you have to let me try." She hesitated, muscles tense, but she didn't attack. Taking her stillness as permission, Elias moved closer. His hand shook slightly as he worked, wrapping the brace around her massive, broken limb. She hissed, in pain, but she didn't strike. "Almost there," he whispered. It took nearly an hour, but when he stepped back, the brace was in place. Elias exhaled deeply. "Okay," he said softly. "Try to stand." The dragon shifted, testing the brace. She let out a deep growl of discomfort, but then slowly she pushed herself up. Her wings trembled, and her claws dug into the dirt. But she rose to her feet for the first time since Elias had found her. The hatchlings squeaked, excited by their mother's movement. Elias felt a wave of relief and pride. "You're standing," he said with a grin. "You can do this." But the moment didn't last. A distant engine growled through the canyon, breaking the silence. Elias stiffened. He knew that sound. It was a hovercraft, small and fast. The poachers were back. The dragon turned toward the noise, her wings partially spreading despite their damage. A low, threatening growl rumbled in her chest. Elias grabbed his tools and shoved them into his bag. "We need to hide you," he said, quickly, scanning the canyon. But there was no place large enough to conceal a dragon. The hovercraft grew louder. They were getting closer. Elias's heart pounded as he ran to the speeder. He had no weapons, nothing that could hold off armed poachers. All he had were his tools and his mind. He turned back to the dragon. "Stay here. Protect your young," she rumbled in response, crouching low, her tail curling protectively around the hatchlings. Elias climbed onto his speeder and raced toward the canyon entrance. He had no idea what he was going to do, but one thing was certain: he wouldn't let those poachers take her hatchlings, not while he was alive. Elias pushed his speeder to its limit, the engine roaring as it sped over the uneven ground. He had no clear plan, only one thought repeating in his mind: keep the poachers away from the dragon and her hatchlings. The sound of the approaching hovercraft grew louder, bouncing off the canyon walls. As he neared the canyon entrance, he saw them, a small hovercraft painted black with faded markings, built for speed and carrying to armed men in scavenger armor. Poachers, just as he had feared. They hadn't seen him yet, their attention fixed on their scanners as they navigated toward the nest. Elias slowed his speeder and pulled behind a rock outcrop, breathing hard. He couldn't fight them. He had no weapons, no armor, nothing but tools and a stubborn will. If they reached the dragon, she wouldn't survive another attack in her current state, and her hatchlings would be taken. He had to think fast. His eyes darted to the canyon wall steep, with loose rocks from the collapsed mining rig scattered everywhere. An idea sparked in his mind. He didn't need to fight them. He just needed to stop them. Elias turned his speeder sharply, racing back toward the nest. The dragon saw him coming and let out a questioning growl. "Not yet," Elias called, his voice shaking slightly from adrenaline. "But soon. You'll need to be ready." The poacher's hovercraft engine echoed closer. They were almost there. Elias jumped off his speeder and ran to his tool bag. He grabbed a cutting torch, a length of high-tension cable, and a few small mining charges he had salvaged from the rig. They weren't powerful enough for real demolition, but they could move rocks if placed correctly. He worked fast, setting up the cable between two jagged boulders above the narrow canyon path. Then he attached the charges along the edge of the loose rock slope. His hands shook, but his mind was focused. If he timed it right, the explosion would trigger a rockslide big enough to block the canyon entrance. The dragon watched his frantic movements, her head tilting slightly. She growled softly, as if sensing the danger drawing near. "They're coming for you," Elias said, glancing at her. "I'm not letting them take your young, but I need you to be ready to fight if they get through." The dragon lowered her head, letting out a rumbling growl that shook the ground. Her wings twitched, and her tail curled protectively around her hatchlings. Even with her injuries, she was ready. The hovercraft came into view. Elias ducked behind a large rock, gripping the detonator in his hand. His heart pounded as the poachers slowed their vehicle, scanning the canyon floor. "There," one of them shouted, pointing toward the dragon's nest. They hadn't seen him. Perfect. Elias waited until they were fully in the narrow path. Then he hit the detonator. The small charges erupted with a sharp crack, echoing through the canyon. The rocks above the poachers shifted, then crashed down in a thunderous cascade. Dust filled the air as massive boulders tumbled onto the canyon floor, slamming into the hovercraft and pinning it against the wall. The poachers shouted in panic as their vehicle sparked and hissed under the weight of the fallen rocks. Elias didn't waste a second. He sprinted toward the dragon, grabbing his speeder on the way. But the poachers were fast too. One of them climbed out of the wreckage, coughing through the dust. He spotted Elias immediately and raised his blaster. Elias froze. A deep, earth-shaking roar split the air. The dragon rose to her feet, her brace creaking but holding firm. Her golden eyes blazed with fury as she stepped forward, wings partially spreading despite their damage. The poacher turned toward her just in time to see her lunge. She struck with surprising speed, her clawed forelimb swiping across the ground. The poacher dove aside, his weapon clattering away. He scrambled to his feet, but Elias could see the fear in his movements. The second poacher managed to crawl free of the wrecked hovercraft, but when he saw the dragon standing alive, moving, and ready to fight, he froze in place. Elias grabbed a heavy wrench from his bag and ran toward the first poacher. It was reckless, but he couldn't let them regroup. He swung the wrench hard, striking the man's arm and sending him stumbling back. The dragon roared again, snapping her jaws in warning. The hatchlings squeaked from their nest, sensing the tension. "Go," Elias shouted at the poachers, "Leave now, or she will finish this." The men exchanged a panicked glance. They were outmatched, their vehicle crushed, and their weapons useless against an angry dragon. The first poacher growled in frustration, but he backed away, pulling his companion with him. "This isn't over," he spat. "Those eggs are worth more than your life, mechanic." Elias didn't respond. He stood his ground, watching as they scrambled over the rocks and disappeared into the distance. When they were gone, he let out a long breath and dropped the wrench, his hand still shaking. The dragon lowered herself back onto the ground, growling softly. Elias approached slowly, his heart still racing. "You did it," he said quietly. "You stood. You fought, and you won." She blinked at him, her golden eyes calmer now. Elias could almost swear she understood his words. He crouched beside the hatchlings, checking that they were safe. They chirped softly, nuzzling against their mother. Elias sat on the ground, exhausted but relieved. The poachers would come back eventually, maybe with more men. But for now, they were safe. He glanced at the dragon's brace. It had held up during the fight, though a few adjustments would be needed. That gave him hope. "We'll make it stronger," he said, patting the metal frame gently. "Next time, you'll be ready for anything." As the sun dipped behind the canyon walls, Elias packed his tools and prepared to leave. He paused for a moment, looking at the dragon and her young. For the first time, she didn't growl when he turned his back. It felt like trust. Elias Kane didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the poachers angry, desperate, and promising to come back. He knew they would. They had seen the hatchlings. They had seen him, and poachers never walked away from a prize like that for long. He spent the dark hours repairing the dragon's brace. The fight had bent one of the joint plates, and he reinforced it with strong alloy. He also added more padding where the frame rubbed against her scales. She had stood and fought once, but if there was going to be another battle, she needed to be able to move more freely. By dawn, Elias was exhausted but determined. He packed tools, more food, and a portable energy shield he had been tinkering with for months. It wasn't meant for combat, but it could protect the hatchlings from blaster fire long enough to give their mother a chance to fight. On his way out of the colony, he noticed something that made his chest tighten. A patrol vehicle parked near the gate. Two security officers stood beside it, scanning travelers and inspecting outgoing cargo. One of them recognized him. "Kane," the officer said, "you've been out near the canyons a lot lately. Find anything valuable?" Elias forced a casual shrug. "Scrap, just old mining junk. Nothing worth reporting." The officer didn't look convinced. "If you see anything unusual, especially dragons, you're required to report it. Those creatures are dangerous. They need to be dealt with before they get too close to the colony." Elias managed a small, fake smile. "Understood." He left as quickly as possible, his thoughts racing. The colony was getting more suspicious. If the patrols discovered the dragon, they wouldn't try to help her. They'd kill her, hatchlings and all, in the name of safety. When Elias reached the canyon, the dragon was awake and alert. She lifted her head as he approached, her golden eyes sharp but calmer than when they had first met. She didn't growl anymore when she saw him. "Good morning," Elias said softly, kneeling beside her. "We've got work to do. Those poachers will be back, and I'm not letting them hurt you." He carefully inspected the brace, checking where it had bent during the fight. "We'll need to make some changes," he said, half to himself. "You're stronger than I thought. That's good. We can use that." The dragon watched him as he worked, her breathing steady. Her hatchlings chirped softly from the warmth of the heating unit he had set up. As the day passed, Elias adjusted the brace and installed a small shock absorption system made from repurposed exosuit parts. It would make her movements smoother and less painful. He also set up the portable energy shield near the nest. It wasn't much, but it might keep the hatchlings safe during a fight. By late afternoon, he was nearly finished when the sound he had dreaded echoed through the canyon engines. This time it wasn't just one hovercraft, it was three Elias's. Heart dropped. The poachers had brought reinforcements. The dragon sensed it too. She rose slowly, her brace creaking but holding firm. Her wings stretched as far as their injuries allowed, and a deep growl rumbled from her throat. "They're coming," Elias said, grabbing his bag. "We'll fight them together." He activated the portable shield around the hatchlings. A faint blue barrier shimmered to life, enclosing them in a protective dome. The little ones chirped in confusion, pressing against the glowing wall. The hovercrafts appeared at the mouth of the canyon, kicking up clouds of dust. 6 poachers climbed out, all armed with blasters and shock spears. Their leader, a tall man, in dark armor, pointed toward the nest. "There they are," he barked. "Take the hatchlings alive. Kill the mother if you have to." Elias's blood boiled. He stepped out from behind the rocks, holding a large wrench in one hand. "You're not taking them," he shouted. The poachers paused for a moment, surprised. Then the leader laughed. "You again? Get out of here, mechanic. This doesn't concern you." "It does now," Elias said firmly. "You'll have to go through me first." The leader smirked. "Gladly." Before the poachers could move, the dragon unleashed a roar so powerful that the ground trembled. Her golden eyes blazed with fury as she stepped forward, her massive form shielding the nest. "Kill her," the leader ordered. Blaster fire filled the canyon, bolts of energy striking the rocks around Elias. The dragon lunged, swiping her claw through the air and knocking one poacher aside like a ragdoll. Her brace held as she pushed forward, her movements still awkward but strong enough to fight. Elias ducked behind a boulder, heart pounding, and threw one of his modified smoke grenades. A thick cloud spread across the battlefield, obscuring the poacher's vision. "Now," he shouted. The dragon took advantage of the cover, moving faster than they expected. She slammed her tail into one of the hovercrafts, flipping it onto its side. Another poacher tried to stab her with a shock spear, but she snapped at him with her powerful jaws, forcing him to retreat. Elias grabbed a cutting torch and used it to sever the fuel line of another hovercraft. The engine hissed and sparked before bursting into flames. The poachers were losing ground. "Fall back," their leader shouted. But the dragon wasn't done. With a final, furious lunge, she sent him sprawling into the dirt. The surviving poachers scrambled back to their remaining vehicle and sped away, leaving their wounded behind. Elias stood frozen, breathing hard as the smoke cleared. The canyon was quiet again, except for the sound of the dragon's heavy breathing. She limped back to her nest, lowering her head to check on her hatchlings. They chirped happily, unharmed behind the shield. Elias approached carefully. "You did it," he said softly. "You fought them off." The dragon looked at him for a long moment, then lowered her head slightly in what felt like acknowledgement. Elias sank to the ground, utterly drained. They had won for now. But between the poachers and the colony patrols, he knew this wasn't over. If they wanted to survive, he and the dragon would need more than a brace. They needed a plan. The morning after the fight, the canyon was quiet again. Elias Kane sat on a rock near the dragon's nest, staring at the horizon. His body ached from exhaustion, but his mind refused to rest. They had driven off the poachers, but he knew it wouldn't last. Poachers never gave up easily, not when there was something as valuable as dragon hatchlings involved. And then there were the colony patrols. If they arrived and saw what he had been doing, they wouldn't hesitate to put an end to it. The dragon lay nearby, her golden eyes half closed. She looked calmer now, though Elias could see the pain in her movements. The brace had held during the battle, but it was damaged again. Still, she was alive. She had protected her young. That mattered more than anything. The hatchlings were huddled against their mother, chirping softly. They had survived. Elias allowed himself a small, tired smile. He stood and approached the dragon slowly. "We can't stay here," he said quietly. "Not after what happened. They'll come back. And next time they'll bring more men." The dragon blinked at him, tilting her head slightly. "I'm going to get you somewhere safe," Elias continued. "But I can't do it alone." It was then that he heard the sound, distant engines humming in the sky. He turned sharply, scanning the horizon. It wasn't the harsh growl of a poacher's hovercraft. This was heavier, slower. Colony patrol. Elias's stomach tightened. Within minutes, a large transport descended at the mouth of the canyon. Dust swirled as the vehicle's hatch opened, and four armed security officers stepped out, followed by a man in a clean uniform, Commander Rourke. Elias had seen him before, always calm, always cold. Kane, Rourke called out, his voice sharp. Step away from the creature. Elias stayed where he was. She's injured. She has hatchlings. They're not a threat unless you make them one. Rourke narrowed his eyes. You've been hiding this. I've been helping her, Elias replied, standing his ground. She was trapped under the old rig. I built a brace so she could stand. If I hadn't, she and her young would be dead by now. Rourke stepped closer, flanked by two officers with rifles raised. Do you know how dangerous this is? A mother dragon near our colony? Hatchlings that will grow into full-sized threats. You've put us all at risk. Elias's hands tightened into fists. She's not a threat. She's a mother trying to survive. And those poachers you keep ignoring, they're the real danger. They were here yesterday, 6 of them. If I hadn't been here, they'd have taken the hatchlings, maybe killed her. Rourke glanced at the dragon, then back at Elias. Poachers are a problem, yes. But dragons near our people are a bigger one. We can't allow this. You know what has to be done. Elias felt his heart sink. You're going to kill them. If that's what it takes to protect the colony, Rourke said flatly. No, Elias said, stepping forward. Not this time. The officers raised their rifles, but Rourke gestured for them to hold. And what exactly do you suggest, Kane? You want us to just let them stay here? No. Elias said quickly. I want you to relocate them. There are old wildlife reserves on the far side of Varela 9. You've got the equipment and the people to do it. Move her and her hatchlings there, far from the colony and the poachers. They'll survive, and you won't have to kill them. Rourke studied him, his expression unreadable. And why will we waste resources doing that for a dangerous animal? Because she's more than that. Elias said firmly, You think I don't know what she is? I've been up close. I've seen her protect her young. I've seen her show restraint even when she could have killed me. She's intelligent. She understands. Killing her won't make us safer. It will just make us killers. The dragon growled lowly, as if sensing the tension, but Elias held up a hand to calm her. Rourke folded his arms. You're asking for a lot. I'll help, Elias said without hesitation. I'll build whatever equipment you need to move her safely. I'll maintain her brace until she heals. I'll even go with her if I have to. Just don't kill them. There was a long silence. The only sounds were the soft chirps of the hatchlings and the hum of the transports. Engine. Finally, Rourke exhaled through his nose. You're a stubborn man, Kane. I'm right, Elias said simply. Rourke gave a small, reluctant nod. Fine. I'll authorize a relocation. But if she makes one wrong move, she won't, Elias interrupted. She just wants to live. The commander gestured to his men. Prep the transport. Get containment gear and call for a second crew. We'll move them at first light. The officers lowered their weapons and began making preparations. Elias turned to the dragon, speaking softly. You're going to be safe now. No more poachers. No more fighting. Just you and your little ones. Far away from all this, she blinked slowly, lowering her head toward him. Elias reached out and placed his hand gently against her scaled snout. You trusted me, he said quietly. Now I need you to trust them, too, for a moment. The dragon stayed perfectly still. Then she gave a low, soft rumble, less a growl and more a sound of understanding. That night, Elias didn't sleep in his workshop. He stayed in the canyon, near the dragon and her hatchlings, watching over them until dawn. By morning, the relocation crew had arrived with specialized carriers and equipment. It took hours to secure the dragon and her young, but she remained calm, her golden eyes always tracking Elias as if to make sure. He stayed close. When they finally loaded her onto the transport, Elias climbed in beside her. Rourke approached, giving him a skeptical look. You're really going with them? Yes, Elias said, until I know they're safe. The commander shook his head. You're out of your mind. Maybe, Elias said with a faint smile. But some things are worth it. As the transport lifted off, Elias looked out over the canyon one last time. The place where he had found her broken, helpless, and alone was now empty. He turned to the dragon. She met his gaze, and for the first time, Elias thought he saw gratitude in those golden eyes. "Let's get you home," he said softly. And for the first time since this had begun, Elias felt something he hadn't in weeks. Hope.